Hello and welcome to Rock Paper Swords, the historical action adventure podcast. My name is Matthew Harvey.
And my name is Justin Hill.
You had to think about that for a minute, didn't you?
I had to read the script.
Let's read the script, yeah. You said you used a pseudonym for some. I'm beginning to think that maybe Justin Hill is a pseudonym. You didn't actually know your own name. But anyway, it's good to see you. And we're back for another episode. And I'm looking forward to today's episode, as I always look forward to all of them. But we've got a special guest today.
We do. Very exciting.
Very exciting. And we will talk more about that in a minute. But before we get our special guest on, what have you been up to in the last few days, Justin?
Where was I? I'm sure I've been away somewhere, but I'm at that stage of life where it's hard to remember. No idea.
London. You went to London with your wife.
That was it. We were in London. My wife's birthday.
Not that I've been stalking you.
Yeah, we're in London, and we went to Ronnie Scott's
Nice.
with some friends, which was very cool. A very fun evening. And just hung out with some friends from Hong Kong to kick back, relax, drink some good wine. Yeah, it was lovely.
Sounds
and
perfect.
yourself? Yeah.
Writing and celebrating my daughter's birthday, and then this week it's my wife's birthday in a couple of days. So our wives' birthdays are very close together.
Yeah.
Busy time here.
And how old is your daughter?
It's our eldest. She's 26.
Wow.
So, I mean, yeah, that's a pretty weird situation to be in. Because as you know, we're both the same age, you and me, and you always feel, well, as everybody listening knows, you always feel about 16 years old, really. So it's kind of weird when your kids are 26 and me and my wife got married when we were 25. So yeah, it's a very strange situation.
Yeah. Young quick starters.
Yeah, quick start as well. As we'll mention later on to our special guest. I mean, we're talking about Spain a bit with him, no doubt. Yeah, met my wife many years ago. We met when we were teenagers in Spain. So it's been a long time we've been together.
Yeah.
But anyway, I've been back to the writing stuff. I've been busy working on. I finished the first draft of my novel that I've got to hand in at the end of September. But I've set that aside for a few days to let it sort of marinate before I do a full read through and then do an edit before getting back to the editor. I know there's gaps in it. I know there are things that are wrong, but at the moment I have a book. It's clean, so there's something there. It's 130,000 words, so there's a chunk of work to be done, but it's something there. But anyway, so I moved on to the collaborative novella that I'm working on with Stephen A. Mackay for the Christmas novella.
And how's that going?
Today, I finished my part of it. There's only one chapter scene left to write, which I think is basically Stephen's to do. So he'd written the ending and the sort of the epilogue and everything. We'd already written most of it, but when he gave it back to me, he'd left a couple of gaps, and it was like, you need to write this bit of the fight now with your characters, and I've kind of had to work out how to squeeze everything together and get my people where they needed to be, and sort of motivation.
Did you do it like a chapter each, or?
Yeah, well, we've written in two perspectives, two POVs. So points of view. So he's writing from the point of view of like the heroes, as it were, and I'm sort of the anti-hero or the antagonist. So we've sort of alternating chapters, and then get the big finale. Anyway, I've written most of the big finale, but there's a bit that he needs to finish up and write his side for. So
this is going to be out for Christmas, isn't it?
Yeah, it's going to be out for Christmas, and It should be done in September. I think he's going to move back onto it in September, and then I think we've agreed that you're going to do an interview of the two of us. We can do that for a
Yeah,
bonus episode for the
yeah.
patrons. But yeah, it'll be available to for patrons. I think we're going to give it to the patrons for free, and then we're going to sell it, be on sale from sometime in November. I think October, November, something like that.
Yeah, fantastic.
So yeah, I'll save more details for the future for the title and stuff like that. But yeah, about 40,000 words long, so reasonable
Good
chunk
length.
of story. So I think people will get their money's worth. But
And is one of you writing more than the other? Are you
I think it's been pretty balanced actually.
okay?
He moaned earlier on to say that he was that I left all of the exciting stuff for me. That it was all like you write some stuff, then I've got the big fight scene, and you write some stuff, and I got the fight scene. But as I pointed out to Stephen, I did all the planning. So I said, if you pull your finger out and do some planning, then you can choose to have all the fights. But he's got some exciting stuff, and he's got this big final battle scene that he's got to write as well, big fight
Yeah.
scene. So yeah, it's good. I think it's good fun. I read through it for the first time. I realized it had been months since I touched it. It was like the last time I'd written anything on it was, I think, February or something. So it was
And
incredible.
this is the first time you've written something with someone else.
Yes, yeah, the first, maybe the only ever time that I'll do it. But yeah, it's been a challenge, but not too much of a challenge doing something quite simple. I think like a novella with a very simple storyline. We didn't try to make it really complicated because we want to do it as little back and forth as possible. Sort of keep it quite contained, each of our parts. But yes, it's been good. It's been good. I hope people will like it.
Yeah.
So, what about you in the writing front? You've I'm watching your updates, and how are you getting on?
So my contemporary thriller had about 80,000 words, and I cut about 7, added 1, some on 74, and then a project I was working on earlier in the year came back to me with quite a tight deadline. So I kind of dropped
I'm
everything.
assuming that's from the publishers that cannot be mentioned,
Yes,
because they I remember when I worked doing some of that stuff, they took a very long time to come to me, and then it was suddenly like, get us this, straight away.
Yeah. So quite tight deadline. So it's been kind of all hands on deck, and editing, which is fun. I mean, it's fun because this novel's almost finished, and so yeah, just rejigging little bits, just little deft touches here and there, and then funnily today, my daughter, I've been running back and forth with my daughter. The Women's Rugby World Cup is happening in the UK,
Oh, yeah.
and a lot of the teams are based in York, which is one of the venues, and so they had some New Zealand rugby girls over there doing some things with them today. So that was fun.
Oh, cool.
She got her shirt signed. Yeah, so next couple of weeks I'll be doing this book, and then back to my Justin Hill thriller, which will be great. Yeah.
So it's a Justin D. Hill that you're working on at the moment, then, is it?
Yeah, I am.
Okay.
Incognito.
You can't tell us anything about it, but one day when it's been published, you can tell us all about it.
Yeah, I'll reference back to it.
Yeah, once you get it out, we can talk about it on the podcast, and actually you can say this is what it's about once it's out, or give us the title at least.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, reading the book for today, because we have quite a special guest today.
So you've been reading that book. I'm just thinking if I've been reading anything. I've been reading. You know what I've been reading? I don't think I've got it here, but I'm prepping for this new novel that I'm going to be working on after September, which is going to be based in a time period that I've never written about before. And I've been buying lots of books about ancient Rome, which gives away what the time period is. But I've been ordering them online, lots of secondhand books. So some of them are amazing, got lots of detail and very sort of scholarly books. But I found I can't remember what it's called, but it's something like a time traveler's guide to ancient Rome, but written for children. It's like an Usborne children's book, but it's brilliant. And I think this is perfect introduction for me, because it kind of covers everything that I want to know from a very high level. And then, of course, you can drill into it, and it's lots of it's like sort of interesting little tidbits of information. And then you cross-reference it with proper scholarly stuff, and it's all good. So
I used to love the Usborne books.
Yeah, me too.
I didn't know they're still going.
Yeah, this is like a little paperback. Next time I'll try and remember to bring it out so I can show you. But it's really good. I had books like that. I had Usborne ones about the Vikings and about I think maybe about the Romans as well. But I remember I had a few of them as a kid. It really got me into sort
Did
of
you have that?
different
There's like
areas
a
of history.
Peoples of the World sort of series about the Vikings or the Incas. They were kind of A4 sized.
It was big, the one I had, but I don't remember the Incas. But I remember I had a hardback that had like four, and it had the Vikings, it had like Normans and Middle Ages castles. I don't know what the title was, but that was sort of what I remember from it. And then maybe another couple, but I can't remember what they were. Maybe one was the Incas, and I just wasn't
Mm,
interested. I don't know, but I don't know. It had like I seem to remember having three, or maybe the Egyptians was one of the others, and maybe
yeah,
the other one was like Rome. That would make sense.
yeah.
Rome being, so such an important part of history. But yeah, so really enjoying that, and that's the next thing will be um,
Sandals and togas.
sandals and togas. Yeah, I'm not going to give away much more of that, but it's going to be something a little bit different. It's going to be a standalone. So yeah, hopefully it's going to be good.
Yeah, fun.
Intrigue and shenanigans in ancient Rome.
Yeah.
Today's guest is Simon Tolkien. A former barrister, Simon has carved a writing path from courtroom drama to sweeping historical fiction. His novels plunge readers into the grit and humanity of the 20th century, blending history with gripping storytelling. His latest epic duology of novels, Palace at the End of the Sea and The Room of Lost Steps, takes the protagonist from Depression era New York all the way to the conflict of the Spanish Civil War. And on top of all of that, he is also the grandson of J.R.R. Tolkien and director of the Tolkien estate. And Simon has even been involved as a contributor to Amazon's The Rings of Power as a consultant, I believe. So, welcome to Rock, Paper, Swords, Simon Tolkien.
Thank you for having me on, Matthew.
Well, you're very, very welcome.
So, Simon, you started with legal thrillers and have moved on to your modern history. And I think this is a passion of yours. And many of our listeners, Matthew and I both write historical fiction, amongst other things.
Mhm.
Um, and you clearly interested in history and modern history. And tell us about that and your interest in which periods have really grabbed your attention.
Well, I mean, I loved history as a kid.
Mm,
I was just fascinated by it. Um, and I remember we had this incredible book that my mother must have inherited from her grandfather or gone back in the family called Haydn's Dictionary of Dates. And it was so big that if you dropped it on your foot, clearly, surgery would actually be required. And I got a sort of vision of myself aged like 8 or 9 with these vast leather-bound books reading about the Khanate of the Golden Horde and Genghis Khan and Alexander and everything. So I just loved history. I was
mm,
just adored it. And then I think also as a kid, I read all those 19th century novels like The Count of Monte Cristo and War and Peace and everything. So I always loved it. And then I studied it at university. But it was always, I don't know if you've had this experience with doing history, but it's always like, why did this happen? And what were the results of that happening? And it's all kind of boring. So
mm,
I felt I missed out on what actually happened and what it was viscerally like to be on a battlefield or in the middle of a revolution and things like that. So I feel with historical fiction that that's what I bring to the table is,
mm,
the middle part, not the what it was like. But it was a long road, Justin, to get to that. Because as you say, I started with the legal thrillers because I was told after to write about what I know, which is good advice. Because I wasn't very confident, and I was 40 years old when I first started writing books, which is late for people to get into fiction.
mm.
And so I I needed props, I guess. I started out with courtroom dramas because it gives you a kind of language
Yeah, and a
that,
structure as well, I guess.
right, and a structure, but it's all kind of artificial. So my first two books were about that, and I needed plots because plots give you a structure. But I
Mm,
think what's happened with my fiction over time, and I've been at it for 25 years, is that the characters, and now the characters are more free. So they can exist in their own right and they're not vehicles for the plot.
mm,
And narrative is decided by the characters and what happens to them. So I think that it isn't one reversal from one book to the next, but I think that's what's really changed. And what I don't know whether you get these with your books, but what's really cool and what I really like the most is that once I've got into these epics and these duologies, as you were saying, is you really, the characters are real. So it's like they're people I knew or know. And that's a wonderful feeling
yeah.
that you have a kind of relationship with them and that something or somebody you've created is real that you can relate to. And I feel really, it's really wonderful to have got to that point, I think.
Mm, mm. Yeah, I've been reading The Palace at the End of the Sea, and I was hugely impressed actually because this book, I don't think I'm, and there's no spoilers, that it starts in New York, moves to the UK or England, and then ends up in Spain
Right.
in the 1930s. And I was just so impressed with the amount of kind of historical detail you got, even from kind of slang, New York slang, or kind of, as scared as a long-tailed cat in a room full of rocking chairs. Just a lot
Yes.
of really kind of, it felt really appropriate to me. And I thought, wow, because Matthew and I write about the Dark Ages and Anglo-Saxons. And so
Oh,
your challenge there is a poverty of sources, whereas I imagine for you, there's so much that you could have spent time researching. And I know these books took you quite a long time. Did you get kind of bogged down with the research, or how did that go about?
the, I didn't know how huge this book was going to turn into. I thought I'd write a book about the Spanish Civil War,
Mm,
and it grew out of the Spanish Civil War into why would somebody fight in the Spanish Civil War? And I want to write about an American because I'd emigrated to America. So it grew bigger and bigger and bigger, and it became an entire portrait of the whole of the 1930s. And the research required in relation to that was, as you say, one, an enormous potential. And it took me longer to research the books than to write them.
yeah.
And by research, Spain in the 30s is really complicated. There's like seven, an incredible number of political parties all saying different things. And I had to first of all, find a way into the history, you know, how it all worked. And then you have to get the primary sources because the primary sources is what's gold.
Mm,
Inside that is where you get what it was actually like, going back to what I was saying earlier. And so it took a very, very long time. What I was helped by is eventually in relation to the Spanish Civil War, is that I decided that my character was going to be fighting in Spain as part of what was called the International Brigades, which, when the Spanish Republic was attacked, there was the military rising against it, which led to the Civil War. The Comintern, the International Communist Organization, set about organizing for brigades from all over Eastern Europe and the United States and everywhere to go to Spain and fight for the Republic. And quite a lot of communists went, quite a lot of Jews went. And from America, a lot of people who were involved in the labor struggles, which we all know were
mm,
occurring in a very strong way at the time of the Great Depression in the early 30s, when people were fighting for union rights. And all these people left accounts, not all of them, but 3,000 people came from America and fought in Spain. It's unbelievable to have crossed the ocean like that to be prepared to make that kind of sacrifice and risk. And many of them didn't come back. But those that did come back, quite a few of them wrote accounts. And these were amazing to me. And I read the whole lot. And
mm,
also those accounts of British volunteers, because it gave you a real sense of what it was like and what their experience had been. So there was a huge treasure trove of possibility there. And then I also wanted to know what Spain was like before the Civil War, because I had to have my hero in Spain to fall in love with Spain and a girl, of course, um,
mm.
to provide the motivation to be there so that it would be more interesting to the reader. And I found some really interesting accounts of what Spain was like because it was completely different. It wasn't a modern country. It was kind of like Ireland, very, very backward. And 1% of the population owning 99% of the land, and landless laborers and incredible ignorance. And there's a scene in my book where they're in this little village and they put up this sheet and they show Dracula, the movie with Boris. It's not actually with Boris Karloff, and it's the
Yeah.
first time that these villagers are actually seeing. It's like a miracle. It's like from heaven.
Yeah.
These people, are they real? They're touching the sheets and this kind of thing. So it was a very backward and remote place. So that was really interesting. So a
Mm.
It's,
lot of research.
it's really
Yeah.
interesting for me to hear you talk about Spain like that because I moved to Spain as a teenager. My parents went to work there, and I lived for a long time in Spain. My wife's Spanish, and I moved there in 1984, and I moved there, and we visited a few times. And I was very young in the 70s, and we went to a little village in Asturias, sorry, in Asturias. And it was a tiny, very, very, like you say, very remote, rural, backward village. It felt like a totally different world to me coming from England. But even in the 80s and 90s, there were many, many differences. It felt very, very alien in many ways, although it doesn't feel to me alien now because I live there. But really, like your character Theo Sterling, of course, I fell in love with Spain, but I also fell in love with a Spanish lady who I'm now married to. So yeah.
Unfortunately, Theo's journey with the girl is not quite as straightforward as obviously as occurred with you.
Yeah, well, I don't know if it's straightforward.
I don't mean that. I mean,
no, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. I didn't get.
Well, he's got another book to get through
not,
yet, so I'm sure.
I didn't get churned up in a civil war, thank goodness.
Right. Exactly.
But talking about Spain and the history of Spain, it's very interesting to me because of course I lived there, as I say, for more than 15 years, bilingual. I went to school there for a time, and people don't speak about the Spanish Civil War at all. You very, very rarely hear any comments about the Spanish Civil War. But of course, there are memories of it everywhere because it's still within living memory practically. Well, it definitely was when I was living there in the 80s and 90s, and obviously increasingly less in living memory. But it finished in 39, so very, very close to living memory still, and there's probably a few people still alive. But definitely people know about their fathers and uncles and whatever that did things. But there's you see bullet holes in buildings in Madrid, in Toledo, all over the place. There's of course I remember going to Valley of the Fallen, the huge big mausoleum,
Franco's tomb, yes.
yeah, basilica thing in the mountain, which is incredible. It's like, actually there's a real connection in my mind between that and Lord of the Rings because it felt like going into Moria. I went in there as a teenager and I was massively into fantasy and stuff, and it's huge. I mean, it's incredible. You can't believe that you're going into a mountain. It's all been hollowed out and full of massive statues and stuff. I mean, it's incredible. But
Frozen in time.
yes, it's just it's madness. And I'm going to do a talk in a Spanish book festival in October this year in a place called Úbeda, which I've never been to before. So I looked it up. It's in Andalusia, and I looked up in Úbeda, and one of the things that popped up about Úbeda was this statue in one of the town squares, which is of a general, and it's got all bullet holes in it. And I thought I've got to investigate this. So I did a quick bit of research, and it's just trying to find his name. He's General Don Leopoldo Saromarin, and he was assassinated in 1936 in Madrid because apparently people thought that he was involved with the fascists. But some anarchists in the town where his statue was, they shot his statue as well, which I thought was what an amazing thing.
Sort of second best to being able to put bullets in him.
Yeah, so he was already dead at this point, but then they shot his statue, and his statue was then taken down and hidden away for 50 years in some cellar somewhere, and it's been put up again now by the local mayor, 10 years ago or whatever, and it's there now, and people hardly know who he is. But the last piece
I think the problem that you're referring to is what does a country do after it's been through that level of trauma? So you have a civil war which was fought with fantastic levels of ruthlessness and brutality and terror. with, real visceral bloodletting and cruelty, followed by a period of a kind of like freeze,
Mm.
which the whole country is frozen for nearly 35 years
Yeah.
under Franco's rule, and then slowly comes out of it. What do you do with your memory of what has happened if you're going to survive and go forward? And I think what they decided was to forget. But, you know, the bodies are still in the ground. And my understanding is that now, in the kind of third generation, has come forward and said, we want to know what happened to our history. And they're far enough away from Franco. I mean, the
Yeah.
Valley of the Fallen is preserved in aspic, but they've moved far enough away that they're starting to ask questions and to
Well, they've
want
just recently
what
they've just
happened.
moved Franco's body, didn't they, out of the Valley of the
Mm.
Right.
Fallen and
Yeah.
reburied it somewhere else. Um,
But I think it's extremely painful
oh
and
yeah.
remains
It's
extremely painful while the people who actually participated with guilt or remorse or affliction are still there, which is now kind of passing, isn't it? Because it's 90 years.
yeah.
So, there comes the kind of opportunity. But I was immensely struck when I was in Barcelona researching this book in 2019, which I did exhaustively, going up and down the streets, because the whole first section of the Room of Lost Steps is, you could call it the Spanish Civil War, but in a certain sense, you could say it's the revolution in Barcelona, because what happened is that on July the 18th, the night of July the 18th, there was a rising all over Spain. It was slightly earlier in Spanish Morocco. And in some towns, it was successful. In other towns, it wasn't. Madrid and Barcelona, it failed. And in Barcelona, it failed because there was such a strong anarchist presence. You referred to them earlier,
Mhm.
all united within this organization called the CNT, the union, that they had managed to arm themselves, albeit that the government in Catalonia, in Barcelona, did not want to arm the anarchists because they were as frightened of the left wing as they were of the right, which is an ongoing
Mm.
theme in Spain.
Yeah.
But they managed to get themselves into the barracks and they'd hidden all these weapons and they were actually able, which is an extraordinary thing, in a day's fighting to resist the army and to defeat the soldiers in Barcelona, which meant that Barcelona remained as part of the Republic throughout the war. So this all occurred, this extraordinary day, 2 days, which is the centerpiece of the first part of the book on July the 19th and 20th. And I was able to have my character, Theo, participate in all these events that occurred down the streets of Barcelona, starting in the Plaza España, where the first fighting began, going down the parallel to where they had an extraordinary barricade to stop the soldiers getting through to the sea. So the control of the barricade switched backwards and forwards as the army took people from the local flats and brought them up there and said they would shoot them using as a human shield. But then the anarchists were able to counterattack from the sides. So extraordinary dramatic moments, and then
Mm.
crossing through there to the Ramblas, and then
Yeah.
up the Ramblas where there was more fighting into the Plaza Catalunya, where there was even more fighting, and there was a standoff with soldiers holed up in the hotel, which is on the front of the Room of Lost Steps, and the civil guard trying to evacuate the soldiers without the anarchists getting at them. So, and later on the next day, a similar scene at the Carmelite Monastery, which didn't end so well. These scenes all happened in Barcelona of extraordinary drama and historical interest, but there's nothing there.
Mm.
Nobody in Barcelona appears to be aware of it. There are no memorials to any of it. So
Yeah.
it's like a hidden city. The same street, the same places, the Cafe Chicago, where there was the big shootout, is a bank, but it's the same building.
Uh,
And
it,
so it's bizarre. The Hotel Colon, which I've just described to you, and became the headquarters of the Communist Party. Again, it's the bank. Nobody knows. So I felt like a kind of archaeologist. I
it's
Mm.
felt
it's
that
incredible.
I
There's
was trying. I was lifting this extraordinary, dramatic, historical um, city which is still there, out from under all this forgetfulness or oblivion, if you like.
Mm.
And this is why I am so desperate and so want my book to be translated into Spanish.
Mm.
And my publishers are doing everything they can because, I think in Barcelona particularly, there's just this extraordinary history, which is, near and visceral. It's only 90 years ago, and it's stunning.
It's really interesting. I mean, just that I was talking to my wife about it, knowing I was going to speak to you and we were going to talk about the Civil War, and she reminded me yesterday that her school that she went to in Madrid, in a area of Madrid called Usera. It's a convent school, Colegio Nuestra Señora de Providencia. But in the basement, the nuns took the kids, the girls down. It's an all-girls school. They took them down and showed them this tunnel where there are names carved in the wall of people that were killed there. And it's actually called El Túnel de la Muerte, the Tunnel of Death. And the story behind it is that about 70 people were tricked into going down thinking they were going to escape from the Republicans, and the Republicans actually killed them all and stole everything. And there was later on the reprisals and all sorts. I mean, but awful. But like you say, this sort of memories that have just been pretty much suppressed. So obviously, the nuns are aware of it, that are there, and they show the girls, and they try to sort of keep these memories alive. But it's not. There's no monument there.
I mean,
There's
in
nothing.
in Madrid, Matthew, and this is only it's not live in my book, but one of the characters was there and talks about it. There was the fighting earlier on, earlier on than the. So this is the end of 1936 when
Yeah,
the Spanish army under Franco arrived practically at the gates of Madrid. And there was this backs to the wall Republican defense of Madrid and this hand-to-hand fighting that occurred in what was called the University City.
yeah,
And
yeah.
in the University City, the fascists were there, mainly the Foreign Legion, which Franco had brought from Morocco, and they were fighting them door to door in the lecture halls
Yes.
in order to save Madrid. And the government had fled to Valencia. So it wasn't there. They thought it was all going to go, but they managed. The anarchists came under Durruti and helped with it. But there are extraordinary stories that they had encyclopedias. And if you had an encyclopedia of 500 pages, you could stop a bullet. So they were actually had the encyclopedias in the windows to stop the bullets coming through. There are tales of the some of the Berber soldiers eating some of the lab rats in the basement of some of these places and dying these terrible deaths. And at night you could hear them screaming. And then some of the buildings they were fighting where the Republicans were in one section and the fascists were in the other, and they were throwing bombs in the lifts, in the elevators, and throwing them up and down. This gives an indication of the sort of visceral, hand-to-hand nature of the Civil War, and it was extraordinary that Madrid was saved in that context. And it's that description of what occurred in Madrid, which is also one of the things that inspires Theo later on to decide that he wants to go to Spain and fight for the international brigades. And then he becomes involved in these great pitched battles that occur around Madrid afterwards.
Yeah, it's interesting that because I know this period of history from writers like Hemingway or Laurie Lee and Orwell, who were both involved in the Spanish Civil War, and so
Yeah.
many kind of Western writers went there and wrote books about it. But it's not something you hear about anymore. I think it's been overshadowed by the Second World War. Is it still relevant, do you think, to what's going on at the moment?
Well, I think it's supremely relevant because it was about what happened in Spain was that a democratically elected government that was going to change. The anarchists didn't think fast enough. What I've
Mm.
described as the extraordinarily backward world in terms of land and education was overthrown or attempted to be overthrown by the army. And the army was supported by Hitler and Mussolini, by the
Mhm.
fascists.
Yeah.
And the Western governments, England, the UK, France, which was under a socialist government, they refused to help. And they pretended at the same time that nobody was helping when everybody knew. I mean, look at the bombing of Guernica, that
Mm,
Hitler and Mussolini were hugely invested on the fascist side. And that's why Franco won, is because of the support from Hitler and Mussolini. And the Western democracies stood aside. Not only did they stand aside, but it got as far as the fact that the French closed their border. So when Theo is volunteered to go into Spain, he has to cross the Pyrenees at night, pursued by French border guards. Incredibly
mm,
dangerous. So it's we all think about Munich, but what happened in Spain was Munich in spades, right?
yeah.
That's where appeasement occurred. That's where fascism was allowed to win. And the reality was is that the only people who were prepared to do anything was the Communist Party. But the Communist Party was Stalin. And this is, you mentioned Orwell. The whole point of the Homage to Catalonia is that Orwell went there and he discovered what joining the Communist Party to fight the fascists actually leads to, which is the final point of the Room of Lost Steps, because Theo, without doing any spoilers, ends up being in exactly the same, he is persecuting as an
Mm,
interpreter the very people that he went there to try and save.
mm,
And it ends up with the Orwell situation, which is precisely what happened to Orwell in Spain in the same way, and which ultimately led Orwell to write his books about totalitarianism, and especially 1984. So you see totalitarianism in the world, you see the issue of appeasement, you see the issue of democracy. So I think these issues, what occurred in Spain, are incredibly important, and it also fits into this whole issue of the McCarthyite witch hunts, which we see films like Oppenheimer about,
mm,
because the people who went to Spain to fight fascists, they called them premature anti-fascists, but a lot of them were communists because the communists were the only people doing anything about it. But as far as America in the 1950s, they were, the enemy,
yeah.
even though they were the people who were the first people who'd actually tried to stand up against fascism, which the Second World War was about. So the whole thing is replete with irony, and I think has enormous resonance in our world.
Mm,
Well, it's interesting you're saying it. As you're speaking, you're making me think about two things. One, that I know you've written a book about the Battle of the Somme and the First World War, and I heard in another interview that you said you were going to probably move on to the Second World War after this duology comes out, and that you might be researching something there. And also makes me think about, I know that your grandfather, J.R.R. Tolkien, of course, said that his books weren't allegorical, but there's lots of parallels between things that happen in Lord of the Rings, don't you think, and things like Battle of the Somme and the Second World War and all the rise of Sauron and fascism or whatever.
The defense of my grandfather, he was right. I mean, just completely right. His books are not allegory, but he would have been the first to say that an experience of the horrors of the trench warfare in 1916 is going to massively affect a extraordinary imagination and determine its where it goes. I mean, and I think that the effect of the Somme and what he discovered had an extraordinary effect on his creation and vision of evil. But I think that it is completely untrue that he was using the Middle Earth as an allegory for the atom bomb or for evil or Sauron. It affected his imagination, and sometimes in a pretty explicit way. I mean, when Gollum and Frodo and Sam are crossing the old battlefield of Dagorlad that came at the end of the Second Age,
Yeah.
they are, they see the corpses, as Gollum memorably says, holding their candles. Um, he's seeing the psalm, of course, but it's not allegory. This is why I think he objected to Lewis so much, which I think caused a great deal of trouble between fast friends.
yeah.
Lewis had been such an immense supporter of his writing, and I think so often in relation to my grandfather of how the hell do you do that? How do you write for 12 years if you don't know you're going to be published? It's beyond me.
Mm.
And it's amazing. And I think the support of his friends, especially Lewis, was important, vital to him in that way. But it wasn't allegory.
Oh, that's interesting. So, well, as we're talking,
Very, very important, because my grandfather, and I agree with him about this, he regarded writing stories or making art as, the most wonderful things that human beings can do. But if they're just means of just mirrors to what life here is like, they're not creative, they're not creation. What he would have seen as the divine spark is the act of creation, what he called subcreation.
yeah, I mean, it's what lots
Allegory
of
is
people,
not that.
yeah,
Allegory is
Yeah, I
lots
think
of
they
people
kind of
call it magic, don't they? Really, it is the ultimate form of magic. Creating nothing from or something from nothing.
yeah. I mean, it seems to me in so many kind of, I mean, it's obvious ways about the dead marches and things where you can get kind of parallels with the First World War. But I think even the sense of kind of fellowship and of sticking through a kind of hopeless situation must be incredibly kind of redolent of the experience of the trenches and the First World
I
War.
think he said this as well, the whole relationship between Frodo and Sam and the
Yeah,
Mm.
relationship between officers and what were called their batmen were their personal servants was obviously intensely important in the First War in such terrifying conditions. Just yet, as you rightly say, Justin, another example of how your own experience then fires your imagination.
yeah,
I'm
and
not,
all kind
I'm
of
not disputing that at all. I think the Great War had a very great effect on his imagination, just
mm.
not allegorically.
Yeah.
And it must have been. I'm kind of curious about this because people think obviously Simon Tolkien, his great grandfather was J.R.R. Tolkien. Clearly, he must have got grandfather. He must have got the bug from his grandfather. And I wonder whether that's true or not, because of course you have eight grandparents or great grandparents or grandparents, sorry, and yeah, my maths is never good.
And
Um,
you're
I'm getting all
he's
mixed up.
my great grandfather, and he's
Yeah,
my
so four grandparents, and I wonder, are there, because of course your mother was an artist as well. Uh,
stop.
were there other kind of artistic elements within the family?
I don't know. I mean,
Hmm.
this is the whole thing. Trace back, and where did that come from? You know,
Yeah.
I start doing something, and that must be because my great aunt Louisa was doing the same thing. I'm not sure of the answer to that.
Hmm.
Yeah, clearly there is a genetic process that we all receive through our DNA, and if you write novels and your grandfather was a great storyteller, then you would think that there is some form of genetic inheritance, of course. No, there's nobody else. Um, I think I think that for a long time, um, my grandfather's legacy was a contributing factor to my complete certainty, religious certainty, that I couldn't write fiction.
I'm sure.
It's I think I felt really, probably really pretty overshadowed. I mean, if you're going to do something, you'd better not go there because the bar's so high that you're going to make a fool of yourself.
Yeah.
I think it was part of it, and part of it, I've been asked this so many times, and you give the answers that you've given before, but all the time it's a question of looking back and wondering, is that true or not? Because there isn't a definitive answer. And I think
Hmm.
I was really lacking in confidence.
Mm.
So then that changed because I became a lawyer and I became a barrister. And then I started defending, I was defending people in court. And I think you have to have confidence as well as determination to
Yeah.
write, to write novels. So I think for a long time, the kind of the legacy, if you like, was somewhat mixed. Not my grandfather's fault. And
No.
also rather good news is that I never, my kind of feelings never changed what I felt about the Lord of the Rings. I've always really loved the Lord of the Rings, which is
Yeah.
good. That's good news. Because I
Yeah,
mean,
it
if
is
you were,
good news.
can you imagine, Matthew, Justin, if you were related to somebody who'd done something that you really disliked, and then everybody kept on asking you about it, it would
Absolutely.
Well,
kind of
Yeah.
that would be painful. But I mean,
yeah,
yeah, I mean, we're both massive fans of your grandfather's
sure, no, exactly. I understand.
oeuvre, and of course, it's really exciting for us to speak to you.
Sure.
And one thing that I'm really interested in is, as I know that from what I've read, I mean, I could be wrong because it's difficult to find out all the information online, but you
Sure.
seem to be involved with the Amazon Rings of Power series. And can you talk to us a little bit about your involvement with that and how much of your time is spent doing stuff about the estate and your grandfather's legacy, and how much of it you can dedicate to writing? Just sort of balance
I
there.
think there's limitations on what I can say, but I mean, yes, I'm one of five directors of the Tolkien estate, and we manage my grandfather's legacy, and that's an ongoing major operation because it has, many manifestations in many different ways in many different countries. So that's a lot of work. And yes, I'm just one of a number, but we work hard to try and make sure that it's done as well as it can be. As far as the Amazon Rings of Power, yes, I was involved in the sense of making suggestions at various points in relation to the narrative. I don't know really anything about, filming stuff and stuff, but in relation to narrative and story and character in relation to that, which some of which were adopted, some not. And there was a process of communication which continues. I can't really say any more than that.
Mm.
Mm.
I,
I'm not telling you anything terribly interesting. That all seems to me to be kind of like self-evident. As
No,
far
it's
as
interesting. It's interesting. One thing I did hear in one of your interviews. You said that you read reviews of your books, and that you took that things to heart, or you read what people said critically of your books, or not. And I wonder whether you delve into that side of like the fandom,
all the people who
all the
hate
people
me.
that hate everything about you and about the Rings of Power and all that sort of stuff.
No, I'm not really worried about that because um, I believe in the idea. I'm not going to talk about, the execution of the idea is another matter. It's going to be good in some ways, and some ways you're not going to like some things, and you're going to like other things. But I believe in the idea, and my sense is that, and I don't think anybody really says this, is that you've really got to go back to my grandfather, which is that did he regard the second age as being less important in his mind than the first and the third? And I think people go to the fact that he spent so much of his life writing the Silmarillion, which is 90%, apart from the Acalabeth and of the Rings of Power, concerned with the first age. And of course, we know that the Hobbit is in the third age, and then the vast area of the vast, history contained in the Lord of the Rings. But I don't think it follows from this for 1 second that the second age had less importance to him than the first or the third. The reality is that he entered into the third age because of an accident of publishing, which is that he wrote The Hobbit and he then submitted to Stanley Unwin, the publisher. He submitted the Silmarillion, and they didn't want that because what Stanley did, which is I think one of the sort of central moments of 20th century British publishing history, is he said, I want more hobbits. This is all well and good, but I like hobbits. And it's Stanley's completely failure to understand anything really of what was going on with the Silmarillion that provided this kind of completely commercial man provided this alchemical moment which led to the fusion of hobbits and the great world at the moment of my grandfather's life when his imagination was in a sense on fire and he was ready to embrace that. But of course, when
Mm.
he began writing Hobbit Part Two, with the long unexpected party, it was going to be more of the same. But all that had been happening broke through, and there were black riders, and there were wizards, and there were Sauron, and everything happened. But that happened in the third age and not the second, because he was asked to write a sequel to The Hobbit.
It's really interesting, and that's
Not because he didn't regard what occurred in the second age, the seduction of elves and men and dwarves through the rings, the process of corruption by Sauron, the actual idea of Sauron as a live speaking person, and the extraordinary, and most of all, the rise and fall of Numenor and what he called the catastrophe of man. And there's a letter to Milton Waldman in the letters, which I think is it's central to anybody who's interested in Tolkien to see this, which is that the idea of man who dies, unlike the elves, being seduced into challenging the gods was for him, in a certain sense, the central cosmological moment. So the idea that this wasn't of importance to him, and of course he left the magnificent, it's very short, but the Akhalabeth, the account of the fall of Numenor, is I think is misplaced, and I don't think that the conversation about this it deals with this, which is that the second age was of vital importance to my grandfather, but he didn't develop it in the same way that he developed the first and the third, for reasons that were kind of separate from those publishing, writing reasons. And then once he'd finished The Lord of the Rings, he was a different person, I mean, it was very difficult to go back to the Silmarillion. So if you believe that these things can be dramatized, then I think that the second age can be dramatized. And I don't see how you can dramatize it without adding to it, because what we have is, in a varying degree, to some degree, skeletal. Do you see what I mean? So that's where you get. If you're going to dramatize it, and it was of equal weight to my grandfather as the others, and it has equal validity and equal interest, and indeed enormous interest because of the character of Sauron, then I think, and you believe that dramatization is something which is possible and can enhance, not necessarily so, then I think that the idea behind it is entirely valid.
Yeah, and really he's playing with the kind of themes that really interested him, life and death and immortality, and kind of choices. It's fascinating because it's all about the kind of almost like the power of storytelling, and it's allowing the second age to come to the screen. I know myself, I didn't like books at all when I was a kid, and my parents were both teachers, and they were appalled that wasn't interested in books. And I used to play with magnets, and then I read the Hobbit, I read the Hobbit and Lord of the Rings, and suddenly I remember the kind of the moment closing the last page of the appendices and just thinking, oh my God, I can't believe that someone has made up a story that feels so real and that I know is fiction. And when I grow up, I want to do that. I have a copy of, when I was for my 11th birthday, saying to our budding author, of a copy of Lord of the Rings. So it's just, I think it's fabulous that the second age is being brought to, yeah, as you say, it's very skeletal. So it's great that
Like,
it's being fleshed out and brought to a new medium.
I produced it. That's my argument. That's what I think. But I don't see other people, engaging. I don't see other people engaging on that level.
Yeah.
But that's my view of it, and it's always remained my view of it. I think
It,
who Sauron was before he became, when he was speaking and walking and talking and all the rest of it, is a matter of fascination.
it's really interesting to me to hear you mention that moment when Stanley Unwin said to your grandfather, I want more hobbits. And really, that sort of, I know we're sort of coming towards the end of our time, and that leads me just to think that editors and the publishing side of writing often need to be listened to, and they've often got a very good point. And so often as writers we think we know best, but sometimes editors say, how about you write another one of those, or whatever it is.
I wouldn't take that. I don't agree with you, actually, Matthew.
No?
I think this was good chance. This was lucky, because it could have been that he would have just written another Hobbit, but it was the alchemy of the fact that Unwin had no idea of this, not a clue. But it's the idea that if you make, which he would never have thought of otherwise, the hobbits as critical to a cosmological situation in which you have to take something incredibly small and not preserve it, but destroy it. And the way to get that, the only way to destroy it is to take it into the heart of enemy country. And the only way to do that is to do it not with an army, but with somebody. It's because of the luck of the fact that hobbits make the Lord of the Rings work. But Unwin wasn't to see that. It was just lucky.
Well, lucky,
But what is
or
luck? I
a
mean, luck is
nudge,
there for a reason,
a
isn't it?
nudge in the right direction as well. Maybe
Sometimes what editors say is
well, exactly. I mean, I
not
suppose
good.
they're wrong, perhaps, but we've got a last couple of questions to ask you because
I have a question actually before we go to that, Matthew,
yeah, okay.
if there's time. I'm very interested, Simon, in your kind of writing process, because Matthew and I both have spent large parts of our life abroad, and I think that gives you something as a writer. And I wonder whether you moving to California has done something similar for you.
No, I don't
No.
think so. I think that it has two effects. One, I really wanted as a challenge, like I said earlier, Justin, this idea of taking challenges is that I wanted to write more about character. I wanted to free myself to be able to do that. I wanted to write more about history. So I wanted to write about being an American. And that was really difficult because I'm not an American. I spent my first 50 years, I'm married to an American, but my first 50 years in the UK. So it was a real challenge to do that. So I think emigration had that effect upon me. But California, it is a Spanish town I live in. Santa Barbara is a Spanish town. Um, it's very beautiful, but so I think that gave a resonance to Spain to me because the architecture is all Spanish. But it's like I'm living two different lives. It's like I spend my life, whether I'm writing about 1940 or 1916 or the 30s, I'm spending my life, half of it in the blood-soaked 20th century, and half of it I'm in California. And they're kind of disconnected. It's a weird life I lead, you know. And the life of an author is a lonely life. I mean, I'm not lonely as a person, but what you're doing is solitary. And it's only like it took me 7 years to write this book. So it's 7 years since I've actually like engaged with people about it, which is funny, you know. So it's not it's had an effect in the ways I've described, but not otherwise. It doesn't bring me closer, such as if I was to be living in, you know, what we described earlier in, you know, somewhere in Madrid or somewhere in somewhere else in Europe, it would be different, perhaps. But no, I don't feel California is a much more recent history.
Yeah, I guess
Before the beginning of the 19th century, this was the Chumash Indian world, you know? So
yeah, I always find it kind of, I guess being a foreigner living somewhere gives you a kind of, you can see things more clearly in someone else's society maybe than you can in your own. It's almost kind of, you have the outside view. Um, yeah, maybe.
I think that's probably true for when Simon's looking into the Spanish Civil War. That it's definitely not easier. Easier isn't the word, but for want of a better word, it's easier for somebody outside of Spain who isn't Spanish, who hasn't got all of that baggage from living
yeah,
in that world, to look at Spanish Civil War more dispassionately and
I
analyze it.
completely agree. I think
Yeah.
that level of detachment does help.
Yeah, and I'm married to an American as well, so we have that in common.
So many things in common.
You lived in America, did you say?
Yeah, I lived in New York. I lived in China mainly, but I lived in New York for a couple of years when we got married.
You enjoy it?
Loved it. Yeah,
Yeah.
lived on
I
55th
knew,
on
I knew
Broadway.
New York really well, so that was fun for me. You
Yeah,
know,
no,
'cause
I could
the
tell.
first part of the palace is set in New York City,
Yeah,
and I find New York a great place to walk, and so I'd walked a lot of these places, and so that was fun, like recreating 30s New York.
yeah.
I really enjoyed that.
It's one of the few American cities that you can still walk. Um,
I think so.
yeah,
I think so.
yeah,
And you just like break down at the end of the day after you find you've walked 20 miles.
Yeah,
absolutely.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
interesting. So
Yeah.
fascinating. Like looking at everything.
So we've got a couple of questions that we ask all of our writer guests at the end, which are um, Patreon exclusive. So for our patrons, and it's we've got lots of patrons that are aspiring writers, and so they're very interested um, in advice from other published authors that we talk to. So the first of those questions is, what do you wish you knew when you started out that you know now about writing specifically?
That it doesn't come quick. It's a skill that you learn over a protracted period of time. Going back to what my grandfather said, you have created something outside of yourself. And so in a certain sense, I mean, I think all art is like this. I don't think it needs to be a novel. You can do something with music or art or whatever. It doesn't really matter. But you have created something that exists and has value outside of yourself. You're not limited by your own physicality.
Yeah, surely that's what makes us human. Really, it's part of the human condition that differentiates us from the animals.
The storytelling instinct.
That's it. But
except that the animals have secrets we don't.
Yeah.
I look at my pug dog, and she knows a great deal more than I do in some way.
My cockapoo does not.
Yeah, I was going to say, I'm not sure my dog knows much more than he's letting on. He sometimes pretends to look wise, but I don't think he's really got a lot going on inside his head. But he's faithful.
I don't want to disagree with you again.
No, don't. Yeah, come on. Yeah, let's not argue about.
It's an off track. But yeah, it's a long process.
Well, thanks ever so much for your time.
Fun. I really enjoyed talking.
Yeah, thank you.
Great hearing about your experiences at all. And we didn't talk about Anglo-Saxon England, which I couldn't begin. When I feel if I go back beyond 1900, I can't do it because I can't create verisimilitude. It's got to have a 19 in it for me to work. So getting into something that has 9 and no 1, 900. I mean,
yeah. Well, I've written some 7th century stuff. Some of mine is 7th century and
magnificent. You know.
Yeah. And are you writing something now? Are you moving on in time?
I'm doing the publicity process at the minute, but yeah, I do want to go to the Second World War. I did touch on the Second World War, more than touch. My novel Orders from Berlin was set in the Blitz in 1940. It was about a plot to kill Churchill. So that was kind of fun. But what I'm really interested in, I want to look at about the whole issue of resistance and occupation and agents sent in from elsewhere, whether it be in France or Belgium or Holland. I'm interested in, from a character point of view, in the different ways in which people respond to that situation. I'm very interested. And that's where I want to go. Quite in what form, I don't know.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds fascinating. So hopefully
293,000 words.
I was going to say, hopefully it won't take you 7 years to write that one, and then we can get you back on to talk about the next novel.
Absolutely. It's been an awful lot of fun. Not my publicist, where can we watch this? And will you send me a link or something?
I'll send you a link. It will be on YouTube and it's going to be on Spotify and so it's on all the Audible. It's on Audible as well. It's on all the audio podcast places, but it's also video. It'll be a video on Spotify and on YouTube as well.
Really enjoy that.
Yeah, well, brilliant. It's been absolutely brilliant having you on. So thanks ever so much for the time to talk to us.
I hope that you can get a copy of Room of Lost Steps, because if you've both been in Spain and had this strong experience of Spain, that really does delve into what the Civil War and the revolution in Barcelona was like. It's meant to really, it's quite visceral.
And that's coming out in September, I think, isn't it?
September, yeah.
Yeah. So
you can find out what the Room of Lost Steps is, which is. Just one last thing. I really like these titles. I don't know what you think, but with No Man's Land, which is my book about the First World War, I thought, oh my God, all these other people have written these novels called No Man's Land. This time round, I'm gonna have books with great titles which nobody else has ever had. So if there's actually going to be something about the palace at the end of the sea or the Room of Lost Steps, I know it's going to be like me. So that part of it I'm kind of happy about. I guess that's my last piece of advice to aspiring writers: is get yourself a title that 20 other people haven't already had. So there we are.
Yeah.
That's a
No,
good piece of advice
yeah.
because you can't copyright a title, can you? So that's a very good piece of advice.
Great talking to you both. Great meeting you both. I
Simon,
really
a pleasure.
Absolutely a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on, and best of luck with the book and everything else that you're involved with.
good. Take care, both of you. Thank you.
Thank
Love
you.
Cheers. Thank you.
Bye bye. He's a great character. He disagreed with me a couple of times.
Yeah, that's good.
It was funny. I thought it was really interesting because I wanted to make the point that I think that quite often we disagree with our editors. I mean, I don't know about you, but often, they say things you think, oh, really? You don't know what I want. Don't know my vision. But if Stanley Unwin hadn't said to, the publisher hadn't said to J.R.R. Tolkien, screw the Silmarillion, which to be fair, the Silmarillion is not as readable as the Lord of the Rings.
No.
So instead of, if he'd said, oh yeah, brilliant, let's do the Silmarillion, let's go with that, Tolkien probably would have disappeared pretty much, after The Hobbit. That would have been it.
Yeah, no, it's
Whereas The Lord of the Rings is like one of the seminal works of fantasy in the 20th century, if not the seminal work of
I
fantasy.
think it's always good to listen to the editor or any reader, really, because even if they're wrong, what they're doing is they're flagging something up that you need to fix, or you probably need to fix. And it might not be what they suggest, but they're just doing their best.
Well, exactly. And Simon brought up the fact that it was luck that his grandfather had been studying creating this whole universe of ideas that then seeped into the story of Lord of the Rings, because he had this Hobbit and he didn't really want just to write about hobbits, and so it expanded into something bigger. But if he hadn't started with the hobbits, let's write more about the hobbits, it wouldn't have been the same story. If he'd started with Aragorn as the main character, or Boromir or someone else, it would have been a totally different story.
Yeah.
So anyway, really interesting conversation. And and any other thoughts?
He was great. I was going to ask him about kind of Michael Wood talks about you have to go to places to get the real sense of them and the geography. And it seems that he was doing that exactly, which was really interesting.
There felt like we could talk for a lot longer and we could have asked him a lot more. And he was interested in what we had to say as well. But there's only so much time you can keep people. And I was aware that at the beginning he did ask how long we were going to talk, and we'd overrun by about 15 minutes by the end. And I thought, we're sort of pushing it. Anything else?
I feel he could have gone on for hours. I mean, I was so enjoying it. I mean, it's lovely to talk to I always think it's lovely to talk to other writers. It's one of the most exciting things for me about the podcast is that I get to talk to you, Matthew, clearly, but they also talk to other writers as well. Because
you can talk to real writers and me.
It's an odd thing we do, and he has a kind of a unique perspective on being a writer and being the grandson of a writer as well, and having the whole kind of
Tolkien. The grandson of like the writer,
the greatest novelist of the 20th century. So that's really interesting, and I thought I could have sat and listened to him for hours, because what I like, he's opinionated, and not in a kind of boshy way, but an opinion is he's got his ideas, and I think that's always very interesting to hear from another writer.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you're right, and it was interesting that he, when he disagreed, he was always with a twinkle in his eye and a bit of a laugh. But it's good. It's better to be opinionated and say that you disagree with someone and have a bit of conversation about a point, rather than just nod and say yes, I agree with everything you say. That's it for today's episode. We hope you've enjoyed it, and don't forget to leave a review and subscribe to the podcast. If you're watching this on YouTube, please subscribe and do all that stuff. Thanks to all of our patrons, and a special shout out to our Patreon producers, as always: Adam Turner, Ben Mayer, Andy Maxwell, Ben Fox, Daryl Hare, and George Johnson. And if you want to become a Patreon, get over there and sign up.
You can sign up for as little as £1 a month, or buy us a beer at the link tree in the show notes.
Yeah, and until next time on Rock, Paper, Swords, it's goodbye from me, Matthew Harvey.
And it's goodbye from me, Justin Hill.
And remember, whatever action and adventure you have going on in your life, be kind,
stay safe,
and happy reading.